sacrifice for some insanity. Left a boy, now half a man. My innocence was lost in a foreign land. Fought so hard and I fought so long. I fought for my country, right or wrong. In the eye of the slaughter, no star-spangled banner did I see. There is blood on the water, it's flowing like the blood inside of me. In smoke-filled rooms, the men of might will send your son somewhere to fight. And I am one of many more, just pawns in a holy war. In a field where the food used to grow, there's a murder of crows. Now the war is dead and gone, but the battle goes on and on. And the dream that used to be is buried so deep inside of me. I believed what I was told, but all that glitters is not gold. I still see my brother's hand. Why he died I'll never understand. I'm a soldier at war. I know you've seen my face before. Just a name and loaded gun. One more lost, forsaken son. I'm a soldier at war. I'm a soldier at war. I'm a soldier at war.
Hello, this is Dan with the Veterans for Peace Forum. Comes to you every fourth Saturday of the month, so please keep checking in. I wanted to, we're going to have an interview here with Len Bradrick, who I met at the, was it the Beat the Drums for, to ban cluster bombs.
Yes.
And Len had son Travis was killed by cluster munitions as he was clearing in what was it, in Karbala?
Karbala, Iraq.
Okay. And then I wanted to also introduce a little film, because there was something that just happened here. We're going to be talking about, you know, what bombs do to war-torn countries, what it does to the families of those people who are the victims of that, and what war in general has an effect upon families and our whole communities. But also there is, how do we stop wars? And there's some incredible people out there as war resistors who have been speaking out. And up there in by Fort Lewis, there was just this last weekend, we had support for GI whistleblower Bradley Manning. Bradley Manning is the alleged 22-year-old Army intelligence analyst who was leaked the video of the U.S. I think it was called Collateral Murder from WikiLeaks, which shows we're still getting some sound mixtures here, that had the helicopter that came in, and you literally saw them shooting down innocent civilians. So we're going to go ahead and go to that film.
We're down here today to support the campaign to free Bradley Manning, be supportive of him. I mean, he's the whistleblower. He's blowing the whistle on war crimes. He shouldn't be the one who's getting prosecuted for it. He should be a hero, and we're here to support him as the hero that he is, and to support those who blow the whistle on war crimes.
Veterans for Peace considers Bradley Manning to be a hero because if he did what the Army has accused him of doing, he's following his responsibility to defend the Constitution. Even the Uniform Code of Military Justice requires soldiers to report war crimes or evidence of war crimes. And this is what he's done. He's released a video called Collateral Murder. That's what he's charged with. This video has now been seen on YouTube by 7.5 million people around the world. And what it shows is U.S. soldiers shooting unarmed Iraqi civilians from an Apache helicopter, including 2 Reuters journalists. If that weren't bad enough, we talked to some of the people who were in that unit, Josh Steiber and Ethan McCord. You can find their testimony online as well. And they say, well, you know, that might have looked pretty bad, but that's what we did every day. This is not like an unusual day at work. This is routine, that the routine operations of the U.S. military in Iraq and Afghanistan involve killing unarmed civilians every single day. These are war crimes. That's largely what's revealed by the Afghan war diaries as well, which Bradley Manning has not been accused yet of releasing those 90,000 documents to WikiLeaks, but he is considered a person of interest. Those documents, those war diaries, show not only the systematic war crimes, systematic covering up of the killing of civilians, but they also show that the Taliban in Afghanistan has gained in strength every single year that the U.S. has been in that country. It's about 9 years now. And so the Taliban is gaining in strength and influence as a direct result of the U.S. occupation. So those who are concerned about reducing the Taliban's influence, the best thing they could possibly do would be withdraw all the U.S. troops from Afghanistan as soon as possible. And I might add that another reason we're here at Fort Lewis today is we're concerned about the young GIs and their families who are being asked to go back repeatedly on multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan to fight wars that are, first of all, unwinnable, and second of all, wars against an entire population of people. This is putting our GIs in a totally impossible position, and we think they all should be brought home as soon as possible from both Iraq and Afghanistan, and once they get home, they should be taken care of. They and their families have suffered way too much, and they'll be suffering for many years to come as a direct result of being forced into an unending war, and a war that is punctuated on a daily basis by systematic war crimes.
Well, it's important to me that people who know the truth speak out and tell the truth, especially to everyone in this country. Our media is very narrow in its coverage. There's got to be more than 3 stories that in the whole world every day that it's like all the mainstream media carries that. And someone who tells the truth about what war is like and who is willing to tell the truth about what war is really like, we need to hear that, and American people need to hear that.
Bradley Manning is about truth. He stood up and released these videos and exposed the truth. And that's all he's done. He's never harmed a person. He's just stood for the truth. Free him now and bring all the U.S. troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan and other places they might be.
As soon as that video was released, a lot of people started and they were appalled. We were contacted by many people who've never been to an anti-war demonstration, never spoken out against the war. They might have had questions about it. Once they saw that video, they were shocked. And once they heard about Bradley Manning being arrested and charged with leaking that video, they came to his defense. And so it's an international campaign. Within days of Bradley Manning's arrest, a bunch of websites sprung up to support him. And now most people have gravitated to BradleyManning.org. It's a large effort. Bradley Manning Support Network come together really quite spontaneously, and people from many countries around the world are involved. Our Facebook page, Save Bradley, it's all one word, Save Bradley, now has over 11,000 supporters. We were able, in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, to raise over $50,000 in small donations for the Bradley Manning Defense Fund. So this is a very big campaign already, and once Bradley Manning is actually court-martialed, which may happen probably next spring, then we expect the campaign will be even larger as the publicity court-martial alerts even more people to this it's a real moral play, kind of, you know. Some people consider Bradley Manning to be a traitor. He shouldn't be jeopardizing our troops and jeopardizing the security of the United States. But I think an equal number of people, perhaps more now, see that he's done the right thing. He's like the boy. You know, we all knew that things weren't right in Afghanistan. Things weren't right with the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. But now we have somebody who's like come forward like the boy who said the emperor had no clothes, and he's taken a singular act of courage, putting himself at great risk for over the charges he's facing right now could put him away for over 50 years. In order to do his responsibility, he believes that the public has the right to know. And Veterans for Peace at its national convention in August awarded him the Courage of Conscience Award, and we're going to keep on fighting for him to be free as long as until he is. He needs our support.
We're here to support Bradley Manning, a whistleblower that shows what our military is really up to.
There's been a fair amount of coverage early on. You can find articles in Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, and quite a bit of coverage. But after he was first arrested, and there were also a number of questionable articles in the New York Times and other places, kind of impugning him and using rumors to cast aspersions on his motivations, undermine him. But so far in the last couple have been pretty dead silent. He hasn't been in the news. There haven't been any really new developments in his case, except that he has now hired a civilian attorney, and he will be mounting a significant defense. He's had people like Daniel Ellsberg and Colonel Ann Wright and ex-CIA agent Ray McGovern and Michael Moore all coming out publicly defending him, and I think he'll have a very, very spirited public debate about this, and hopefully not only will we eventually be able to win Bradley Manning's freedom, but also put the final nails in the coffin of these unwinnable and illegal wars and occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan.
We have been standing here at this bridge asking for peace for a long time. I hope that one of these days we will succeed.
Well, I wanted to blow my whistle for Bradley. Whistleblowers should be heroes, not criminals. We need to recognize that our history is full of people that have come out and blown the whistle on criminal activities of our government, of our corporations. And so this was a great tribute. Remember, we need all the support we can in supporting Bradley Manning. BradleyManning.org. Go to the website and keep up on what's going on. Now let's get down to talking about what's been happening to you were just on a visit for somebody talking about landmines and cluster bombs?
I've been on several.
Okay. Well, this is Lynn Braddock, who I was introduced to just earlier about talking about cluster bombs. Her son, Travis, was killed. When was that?
Travis was killed on July 2nd of 2003. He had volunteered to stay after the war was over, and mission successful or whatever it was called, and he was going to clear bombs, landmines, things of that type. So I was not happy at all with the situation or the decision, but he was very confident in what he did, and so he stayed with a group of his friends. They were all trained in that type of thing, and I at that time had no knowledge of what a cluster munition was or that the U.S. used them, or I just pictured he was clearing landmines. And so anyway, there was an accident, and they were not following procedures. Travis was securing the perimeter, and the young man who was actually doing the clearance lost a hand and a leg and an eye, and Travis lost his life in the accident.
I'm sorry for your loss, and
Thank you.
I know what it feels like, also losing a child because of war. My son, of course, was through a birth defect that caused by Agent Orange and died in 1981 at the age of 3. But we know,
Yes.
what that pain is. We were talking earlier, how do we get people to understand? We know people empathize with the idea of losing a child, but we have to also empathize. It seems almost impossible, and we don't wish that upon anybody. But we want them to know that, that pain is a pain felt by millions and millions of people.
Exactly. And the pain isn't just felt by members of the U.S. who lose their troops.
That's right.
The pain is felt by everyone in every country who loses a child, a husband, a father. War is horrible, and the pain of loss is the same for all human beings, and it's just so it's through my work that I've really realized there are just things that have to be stopped.
Right.
And I guess so I'm taking a little of what I can possibly have control over, and I'm working on trying to get this particular weapon right now, I'm trying to get banned, so it's sort of like my one little piece of peace that I can work with.
Let's talk a little bit about that demonstration where we met
Sure.
at the Peace Park. Tell us how that came about.
Okay, so what happened is back in, I believe it was 2008, in fact it was 2007 when they launched the campaign, when they realized that the use of cluster munitions was very prevalent and that it didn't fit into the peace treaty for landmines. Cluster munition is a bomb or a shell that is loaded with a lot of little what they call bomblets. And so when they load all the little bomblets, they're not active, or so when they fire them out, these little bomblets usually have little grooves in them, little nylon cords on them, they're all very small, and they just twirl as they come down. And as they come down, they're supposed to go off on impact. And however, the dead rate is very high, and there's a lot of them that scatter and therefore become de facto landmines. Now, unlike landmines where you have them in a grid and you can go dig them up because you've got a grid laid out, these are simply scattered, and they fall over a range depending on the size and how many volleys of shells or bombs you shoot or drop. They can be several football fields big, and then you've got dead scattered all over, and it's basically impossible to distinguish what you're going to hit, whether you're going to hit. It's never to be used in civilian populations. Well, that has not been the case. They do use them in civilian populations, and so you cannot distinguish if you're going to get troops or if you're going to get civilians, or if later on it'll be children that find them. And so the cluster bomb has been just a very inhumane weapon. 98% of the casualties or fatalities are civilians. Very few of them are troops. And as a matter of fact, in the first Desert Storm, more of our troops were injured or killed by our own cluster munitions than by any other enemy weapon. We fire them out, and then our troops march through them.
Yeah.
So, and they can't tell. I mean, they're on top of them before they can do anything about them. So basically in 2007, they realized the U.S. alone had been using them. We used them in Desert Storm. We used them in the war in former Yugoslavia. They were used in 2003 in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Israel's used them.
Israel's used them against Lebanon a couple of times.
Yeah.
And so basically an international group got together. They were trying to get something put together in Geneva. Didn't happen. So civil society just said, this has got to stop. So they began campaigning to develop a treaty, and it went very rapidly. By May of 2008, they had an agreement. By December of 2008, the treaty was signed. It has now been signed by 108 countries.
Is this in the UN? Is it? Where is this being signed?
No, this is signed in Oslo.
Oslo.
It was signed in Oslo.
Okay.
And so, and they were hoping to get something that would come out of the UN, but they are still, they always want loopholes.
Right.
We always want, well, if this happens and that happens, we can use it. No, it needs to be banned. And no, there are no loopholes. There's no, this particular, I mean, there's very strict criteria. They banned the size because it was so small and so attractive, especially for children. Also, you didn't notice it. So in the treaty, it's sort of like you can have multiple munitions in a shell, but only so many. They have to be a much larger size. I mean, it's really interesting when you work on a treaty, all the different, you're like, gee, is this really doing any good? And they said, yes, it really is. Because I'm going, there's still a weapon and it's still being used. And they went, well, the way the treaty is written up, it really will have a huge dent in the civilian population that is harmed by this weapon. So anyway, they signed it in 2008. And then what they do is go for ratification. So states parties have to ratify. 30 states had to ratify. That happened by, I believe it was March. I'd have to count backwards from August. But it happened, I believe, in March of this year. And so 6 months from that 30th signature, we had this celebration all over the world that I had a little piece of here in Portland, which was entry into force day.
Wow.
And so the reason we used drumming was because that was the decision. And for me, that was huge because my son was a drummer. And so it just was just huge for me. And I could feel Travis just saying, we got this much done so far. I mean, we've got a treaty.
That's right.
And we're going to play it up big now. And so now I'm marching forward to get the U.S. to sign and other countries to sign on to this.
It was marching to a different drummer.
It really was a better drummer.
A better drummer.
Change our beat, please. Change our beat.
Well, when we talk about mines, I mean, I was looking at some old paperwork I had, and I was just reading in 1942 there were some 18 million landmines that were buried in the sands in a town just in northern Egypt. And I remember watching a program on landmines in Europe, in which World War II, the farmers were still coming across them, kids were being killed. I've seen a number of programs where children had been wounded and lost arms and legs that survived, and you see these cluster bombs out there that look like little canisters with a ribbon on it, and it looks like, for a kid, like a toy.
It looks
and
exactly
they go
like a toy.
and they just pick that thing up. And so these are the things that frighten people. I remember when I was in Vietnam that most of the injuries that we had was when we went into this area that we were clearing were mines. Somebody had stepped on a mine or in a booby trap and were killed. The very first guy I ever met in Vietnam who picked me up, a sergeant, we had actually committed a mutiny in the field and we weren't going to go any further.
Oh!
And they ordered this sergeant that I met, and he went up this path, and I just remember the brush going around him, and we heard this explosion. He was killed.
Oh my gosh.
And nobody would move. It was just an amazing thing. So, I mean, that's buried in my mind. That's part
Yes.
of something that's I remember, and those people that were, every time I was walking forward, I'd hear an explosion, hear a scream, hear an explosion, hear a scream. And that's something that is a part of my everyday life, as is the life of my child, and my care about all those victims, whether Vietnamese or whether they're Iraqis or Africans or Latin Americans,
Right.
as we've had war after war after war. And these weapons, we spend more money in weapons than we do in educations and working for peace. So, I mean, I'm involved actively through Veterans for Peace. I've been involved through various organizations on solidarity with Latin America, with various groups over my life, thinking about health care, all of the things that we can do to try and work towards humanity, you know?
Exactly.
Create a better place so that we don't use these weapons. But understanding them and being involved as you are. Now, you started off with a particular group?
I started off with a group called Adopt a Minefield.
Yeah.
And in the very beginning, I couldn't really, I don't know how to explain it. I knew I had to do something in memory of my son. I'm like, okay, he was clearing what I thought at the time were landmines. So I have to do something in memory of him. So I chose to do fundraising, more like awareness and fundraising to clear landmines in other countries. And so I did things like I had 2 marathon teams, and we got pledges. We had a lovely big event, and kind of a black tie thing, and invited people, and they did donations, and so we did a number of different things. And I gotta say, I think that's easier. I think everybody goes, oh my God, I hate to ask people for money, and I'm like, well, when you can show them what happens, when they actually can understand this is just so wrong, pretty much it's a no-brainer, and it's kind of fun almost, putting the activities together. But then my family knew exactly what happened to Travis. They knew it was a U.S. cluster munition that had killed him. And they were saying, well, maybe you need to know the whole story. And I think as time went on, I began to realize it was a U.S., that Travis had been killed, basically, by his own military.
What did they tell you at first?
Well, I just chose to let it believed. You know what? They said he was killed in an explosion. My brother actually had to ask for the documentation to find out it was cluster munitions that killed him. And because they didn't tell. In fact, we have tried to do more to try and find other troops, other families that were killed by clusters, so that maybe they would join this campaign. But it isn't like Desert Storm, where they put that as part of the report. That is not part of the report this time. We're finding it very hard to find that information. So my brother had asked for truth and, the documents you can get. He's an attorney. And so I said, I know...
Freedom of information.
Freedom of information, exactly. I know exactly, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what happened, and I believe this is what happened. And he said, yeah, that's true. And so then what happened is I was contacted by a group in D.C. because nobody in the U.S., all over the world, they were launching in 2007 this campaign to ban clusters. Well, of course, there's no one in the U.S. who was interested in taking part. So they asked me if I would go out and speak at that. And it took me a long time. I knew when I get a call or when something like that happens, I know I'm supposed to do it.
Right.
But do I want to do it? Never. I mean, it's not that I don't want to do it. It's just the thought. It's always painful. That's what people have to realize.
That's right.
It's painful.
That's right.
It's, you know, you always feel the anger again. You always remember that day. So it's always very draining and very hard, and I'm getting much better at it, much better. Oh my gosh, I used to hardly be able to stand afterwards. But anyway, I said I'd go to D.C. and I'd make the speech and launch the campaign. And then I stood back for about, it was a good 6 or 7 months before they asked me if I'd do another thing, and that was a tour of the Midwest, where I had 13 days where I had to go and speak in 13 different cities.
Well, and, we know that's a part of therapy. You know,
yes,
it's a part of our healing, and
it was a huge part.
But you know, I mean, we can talk about the statistics on how many figures and how much money, and until you put a human face on it.
Until you put a human face
on it, people don't know.
And that was a big part for me, is once I had started this, they then asked me to join the international group. And so now I'm part of a group, and this group, they get us together. In fact, I am on my way to Lao PDR at the beginning of November.
I thought you had already gone.
No, I just got back from Chile.
Chile, okay.
Right, where we had a conference in Chile to prepare for the big first event in Vientiane. And a good portion of my group will be there. And these are people, excuse me, tearing up, that makes me need a tissue here. Anyway, the people in my group have all been directly affected by cluster munitions. So in my case, it's the loss of a child. Another man from Lebanon, he lost his 5-year-old when they were having a birthday party in the park.
And this is the band advocates?
These is band advocates. There are people who've lost their limbs. There's 2 Serbian deminers. One of them has lost both his arms and his legs. One has lost his arms. There's now a group from Laos. Young man has lost his hand. And one thing that so many of them, like from Laos and from Vietnam, that group, these are young people, part of them that are in the group, who weren't even alive during the war. So we keep killing them long. I mean, there's people here who don't even know what the Vietnam War, I mean, they do, but not really.
Not really.
And this young man would be like that here. He's 17 years old. So once I became part of this group and realizing on an international basis the impact, then not only that, there's a man from Iraq. His nephew was playing with his sons, and they found a cluster and brought it into the house, and it killed 4 of his sons, killed 2 of his nephews, and severely burnt his daughter. So we go to these meetings together, and at one of the meetings I said, okay, you've all been so good to me, but let's be real. I'm the only one from the U.S. here, and pretty much I figured it out, and of all of you here, and at that time there were 16, I said 14 were affected by U.S. clusters. Only 2 were Russian weapons or different, and I said, so I said, I know you don't do this, but I feel like you're feeling like it's about time somebody in the U.S. felt the pain that we have all felt.
Right.
So many countries have felt, so many families have felt. Because here in the U.S., we really don't acknowledge what we consider the enemy's pain. I mean, so many don't. They just don't. And so it's been, you know, because of that, you have to keep up. You have to try and get it stopped. It just would be so wrong.
And there's that other feeling too. You wonder, how are they going to accept me? You know, our weapons that killed people's children, and yet you find out that people know the difference between governments and people. I went back to Vietnam in 2006 for an Agent Orange conference, and went to Friendship Village, which was started by a Vietnam veteran who had Agent Orange, for all these children, Vietnamese victims. And there are now numbers of these sort of treatment centers and places for people to help the parents understand what's going on with Agent Orange, because Agent Orange has many different effects, from retardation to multiple birth defects to, you know, once you see these children and understand the problems that exist, it's you wonder how the hell they could ever forgive any of us. And yet, when I told my story, you know, these young women would come up to me with tears in their eyes and say how sorry they were, and I'm going, how can you be forgiving me, you know?
Exactly.
We were here spraying this stuff and dropping bombs on your people. So it was, I began to realize in almost most situations, whether in most conflicts, that people know the difference between governments and people, because their governments are just as guilty in these things as well as our own. And we know that, that, you know, people don't want to go to war. We don't need to go to war for these things. These munitions cost money. Somebody's making a profit on that. Does your organization looking into who's funding these things?
Following the money. And it's really, that's another thing, they do put pressure. I think it's France who said, you know, the banks or certain things are pulling away from investments when they realize that they have anything to do since the treaty was signed with cluster munitions. It's so that it is a follow the money type thing, and then a pressure on the companies that are making it.
I wondered sometimes, you know, about, you see the stock market, you know, and these various rights. How many people are putting money into a portfolio that raises money for building these bombs, and they don't care who dies, because all they're caring about is how much money they're getting back.
Do I get money? And that's just it. Pretty much, if things are slow and things are poor, the economy's down, a war pops up. And if you watch it, that's normally the way it is.
Well, I like to know a little bit more about, you know, Travis. I want to put that human face on it. And, tell me about Travis as he was growing up.
Oh my gosh, Travis was, I mean, I guess we come from a total non-military family. Very much.
How many children do you have?
Well, I have 2 children. I have Travis and his brother. But the family I grew up in, there were 10 children.
Oh, wow.
And all at the age where we were graduating from high school, 69, 70. So it was right there where we were doing the drafts, and my brothers and my boyfriend and all really close friends. You know, I can remember sitting in front of the TV and watching that type of thing. So we were very, very, there just isn't anybody military in my family. And Travis was one of these absolutely crazy kids. I mean, crazy, 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 where I think it started when he fell in love with Ghostbusters. He loved Ghostbusters, believed it was real, had his own little Ghostbuster pack, was always zapping things and taking care of ghosts. And we had a big old house in an area called Laurelhurst, so it was the perfect, you know, to run up all over
there too.
Yeah, so anyway, and he was always the type that, then from that he decided he had to have a gun, you know, his fake little gun, and then it was the kid that wanted the BB gun, and you were like, no, you'll shoot your eye out. And honest to God, he did shoot a target, just like that little movie at Christmas, and broke his glasses. And so, but he was always, he and I ended up divorcing his father, and I became very much a single parent. And we were always, always battling each other for different things. So when we got in a huge fight over his attending college, because he kept skipping school, and he said they were too stupid, the classes were boring, you know how it is, and I'd march him in, and we'd talk, and get him back in, and get him going. And so anyway, his senior year, he came home and he goes, well, I'm not going to be going to college. And I said, oh. And he goes, and? Because more or less I have said I was going to kick him out of the house if he wasn't going to college. I did say, then you know what you're going to be doing and how you're earning a living, and so you will not be sitting on my couch. If you're not going to college, you are going to find your own place to live.
You're trying to use the stick to encourage
exactly.
him, you know?
But if you go to college, I'll help you pay for it, and you won't have to live here because you'll be at college. And, you know, win-win for both of us. Well, he goes, and I'm not sleeping on your couch. And I'm like, okay. What, you got a house with someone? And he goes, no, I joined the Marines. And I can't even tell you. Now, keep in mind this was in 2000. But I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. But I will say, in many ways, that was awesome for Travis, because he really did learn that he was spoiled. And I mean, one of my first letters from boot camp was, "Oh, Mama, I just miss you so much. And you were so right." But he said, I signed up for this, and I'm gonna see it through, and I'm gonna do the best I can. And the young man who came home was really amazing. I mean, it really did. And what I love too is his sense of people. I would say my son actually was prejudiced, but he ended up having friends from all over, very different from the way he was raised, because that isn't the type of kid. Most of his friends were in college. So it was very much your kids from the South or the Midwest, or, you know, they didn't really have options. But he really got some great friends that had such different backgrounds that made him really realize, oh my gosh, everybody can be pretty darn great if you get to know them. But the only reason he got to know them is he was forced to know them. So anyway.
Did you get lots of letters from him then?
You know what? I got lots of letters, lots of calls. The other thing about Travis is he got into tattoos, which a lot of them do.
That's the culture now.
Oh, I just went crazy. So we had this deal, and I said, okay, no more tattoos. Please, I beg of you, no more tattoos. And I forget how it happened, but finally, okay, Mama, I agree, no more. I said, you know, you're such a beautiful young man. Let's just, the way you are right now, I totally accept it, but that's enough. Well, that last summer home, he's running around without his shirt, and he has a big gauze bandage on his back. And I was like, I don't believe this. I absolutely don't believe this. I said, okay, here's the deal. You do not take your shirt off in my house. I am sick of tattoos. We agreed to no tattoos. No, and I don't care how hot it is, because it was scorching summer. And I said, you don't take that shirt off. And so then the next thing I know, he parades through. Not only is the shirt not on him, but the gauze is gone. And I'm like, so there's...
Mom on there?
See? I said, I'm furious with you. And at this time I hadn't seen it. He goes, come here and look at this. And I went, no, it's some big red icky thing. I don't know what it is. And I said, I have no desire to see what it is. And he goes, come here. So I went over and I went, oh, now I really hate you, because it was a big red heart with Mama right across it.
See?
And I'm like, oh my gosh, now I really am angry because I don't know what to do. And he goes, you know,
that's a beautiful story.
You've always been on my back. So I figured I might as well tattoo you there. So that was Travis. I mean, that was, he was just...
Sounded like he had a great sense of humor, too.
He had a great sense of humor. The very last phone call the two of us were on, it was 2 days before he was killed. And it was one of those great phone calls where you're telling each other, he goes, you're the greatest mom ever. And he had asked me to go to the Marine Corps Ball with him, in fact. He intended to be back in time for the Marine Corps Ball, which is a big thing. And I'm like, oh my God, you're kidding. And he goes, he'd broken up with his girlfriend. He goes, you know, you're the best girl I've ever had. So I was telling him how much I loved him and how proud I was of him. And he goes, tell me I'm the favorite, because I have the two boys. And I went, no, I can't tell you you're the favorite. And I said, and he goes, I made you a mother. You were already a mother when Nick came along. And I went, I'm not going to tell you. I love you both differently. I love you both very much. I can't, no.
Right.
And then finally, he and I were more the same. And I said, you might sort of be, you and I are more alike. I do get you more than I get your brother. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some kind of favoritism, but I'll kill you if you ever tell your brother. I mean,
now he just heard it.
I was going to say, but, you know, and it was, we were laughing so hard. I was just, so it's sort of like, it's huge to know that at least so many people don't get to say how much they love someone.
Right.
And don't get to hear how important. But, you know, so he was awesome. He was, are they all.
As they are.
As are they all.
And this is, you know, I mean, this is the thing, kids growing up, people, fortunate enough to have, as I did, my daughter who survived teenagers. These are rough years, you know. These are rough years, and they're challenging you, and sometimes the military looks to them as the only option out there, especially when we're not funding schools, especially when we're not having alternatives for kids.
Exactly.
You know, I believe in, I'm not one that, I really work to try and stop people from getting into the military, but I do believe that we should have a national service. I believe that people should have options like the Peace Corps or working in your community, that everybody, you know, pays a debt to society.
To society.
And it's a good time to keep people motivated and working out of their heads in some ways, because you're into your own head and trying to figure out where you're going. These are hard times for young people.
I think too, if we did have an obligation to society, we'd be more aware of even our society that we're not aware of. And once you become aware of, my gosh, we have people here that are so different and in such need, that you'll realize, my gosh, we're sending all these resources to destroy other people's lives, when we could be using those resources to really make not just our country better, all countries better.
That's right.
And make a huge difference. I mean, a huge difference. So, yes, I wish, just like you, there should be alternatives. There should be alternatives.
Now, see, when I went in, I mean, I came from a pretty poor neighborhood. We had 6 kids in my family. My brother went into the military at the same time as I did, but we had grown up in, which was a derogatory term, was Felony Flats out in 82nd and near Duke. But it was really a very good working class family. We had, everybody in the neighborhood had kids. I mean, we played in the streets, baseball, and you name it. We had fun, you know. And we could go from play, and if I did something wrong, I could be 2 miles away. I come home and my mom knew about it, you know. I'm going, how the heck did she know? And they didn't have the technology they have today. So just because people were home, nobody's home anymore.
People watched.
And then my father was raising 6 of his kids with as a bartender, you know. When his tips, he raised enough money to feed us and clothe us, and finally got a place in Lowellhurst. And eventually, you know, after a period of time, he had his own business. But I still came from that neighborhood, and I was in this neighborhood, which was upper class in some ways, but still working class family.
Working class, right.
He bought his house for $13,000.
Oh my gosh.
You know, and you can, and that's when people could afford to buy a home on a reasonable wage. You know, working class people could do that. And now, I couldn't afford that house. You know, and these days, no way. With both my wife and I working, and maybe my daughter too. You know, we couldn't do it. So when you think of how,
believe me, I couldn't move back to that neighborhood now.
Oh, I mean, these are tough things, but I had the same problem in high school. I mean, I was skipping school, you know. I didn't find it interesting. I had one teacher at that school that had any interest, that I had any interest in the class at all. And funny thing is, when I came back, he was actually kicked out of the school, said that he was a communist, but I found out he was a Marine veteran, but that the only thing he was doing was having kids become critical about their thinking, and they were questioning the war, and that's why they called him and kicked him out. And here I was trying to figure out what was going on. I dropped out, decided to join the Marine Corps, because I didn't know where I was going either. I just had no direction. And I knew the draft was coming, so I just wanted to beat him. I didn't want somebody telling me. I figured I'd do it myself. And my brother joined, and we both ended up going to Vietnam together. Now, I got, after this operation I was talking to you about, these people died, I came back and I was cleaning my machine gun. My brother came into the same company and platoon that I was.
Oh my.
Yes, and he was in rockets, I was a machine gunner. And both Marines, I ended up going to the Philippines. They shipped me out, and in a few months he was shipped out because he was in a heavy battle. He was wounded. Also, they brought him home in a straitjacket. He just died this last June.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But you know, we both carried different demons,
Exactly.
and But, you know, I know so many people, so many families that have been involved in these wars, and it's a time that we need to try and get people to understand that, you know, we don't need to have families come together this way. We need to have families come together to create peace in this world.
That was one of my biggest fears, is what would Travis, he called one time and he was just sobbing, and he had wanted to go to college. I mean, as soon as he got into boot camp, he's like, could you write me a note? I want to go to college. And I'm like, you did this. But I said, yeah, what do I say? Dear President, please let my son out. He made a big, big mistake. But he was crying when he called in, and he goes, you know what, Mama, I realize now, he goes, I'm probably going to have to go to Portland State, which his dream had been to go down to U of O.
I love Portland State.
And I love Portland State. And I said, I said, honey, that's great. Yeah. That's great. And he goes, well, you know why? Because I won't fit in. I'll go down to U of O, and I'll think they're all stupid jerks. Yeah. Selfish, stupid jerks.
And you know that Portland State was founded by veterans.
Yes. Yeah. I remember. And I remember it was when I went to college, full of guys that had just come back. Yeah. I didn't really. It was totally founded by veterans.
Yeah, it was brought about because of the GI Bills. And,
yeah, I guess I have heard that.
You know, of course, the Vanport flood and all those various things that happened.
Put it together.
Put it together. Yes.
It's an awesome college. It really is, and it's. Yeah. But and I said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And he goes, you know what? I really want to be stupid. I want to be like they are. And he goes, but it isn't possible. It's not possible now.
No, it isn't.
And I said, nope, it's not. And I said, I pray to God. I said, and that was it. I said, keep a journal. He was a prolific reader and a prolific writer. I said, just write everything. Write everything, and then when you come home, you can choose to tell me, you can choose to write a book, you can choose to do whatever. But just like on the Tillman story, very odd, none of my son's stuff ever came home. None of his personal belongings, pictures, none of the journals, nothing came home. I got a box load of dirty uniforms, and I'm like, I do not want these. I absolutely do not want these. And they're like, oh, well, we'll look everywhere. And they never did find. And the kids said that officers came in and scooped up his stuff and told the kids that they would take care of it. They didn't want the kids touching it.
If there was anything that was saying something about, you know, I don't believe in this.
And you know, I'm sure the way my son was, he didn't mince words. I have journals from before he left that he'd packed. And believe me, he called a spade, so.
Well, that's good. I think, you know, somebody gave me some letters I had written back at home I hadn't seen. Tell you the truth, I couldn't read them. I couldn't, I mean, I could read them. I couldn't read them because I couldn't write. I wrote the stupidest stuff in the world, and I'm dyslexic, so I can't spell very well, you know, so I could not even understand my own handwriting and reading it.
Interpret what?
It was horrible. No wonder I was having difficulty in school. But then when I came back, I did decide I wanted to go to college, and you know, I went back and did some stuff in community college, and I came back, found a trade. I was in the printing industry for some 13 years.
Right.
And then I became a labor activist, and then ended up in a big fight, and ended up where I had to go back to school again, and did my bachelor's and master's in fine arts.
Oh, wow.
And which doesn't pay anything, but it feeds my soul. You know what I mean? It feeds my soul. And it's and my work actually is always around these issues. You know, I want to paint pretty flowers. I want to paint nice landscapes.
Yes.
I can't find myself doing it.
Basically, what we need is letter writing to your senators, representatives, and to President Obama. So, and what we're going for, first of all, is we have never signed the landmine treaty. So it's a possibility now. So it's like one step at a time. We haven't used landmines in, I believe it's 21 years. And so we figure one step at a time. So if the U.S. will sign a treaty, it's just getting the U.S. to get on board and become a global participant and to actually, you know, please sign a treaty. So if you'll go to this site,
I think there's this called blog, B-L-O-G, BANA advocates, basically, bandadvocates.org.
And that's
People
one
can go
that
there.
tells about the people that I'm
Yes.
involved with.
Yes. So that way, it's a good way for you to get involved. Also, for those of you who are veterans, you know, I mean, we need veterans coming out and speaking out on these issues.
Definitely. Any veterans who would like to contact me, I am in desperate need. That's one of the deals they want me to do, is get veterans to speak out against it. So if any of you are listening, if any of you are interested, please contact Dan, and Dan will get in contact with me, because that's one of the things I'll be working on, is to get you involved, get you very much involved.
Yes, and you can get a hold of me through Veterans for Peace here, Chapter 72 here in Portland. It's VFP72.org. And that will be the best way to get a hold of me. You can leave a message there. Also, if you like, I can just give you my direct email. It's djshea, S-H-E-A, @hotmail.com. If you'd like to contact me about that, there it is. It's up there on the... Get a hold of me that way. I'd be glad to pass on that information, and just put in the information regarding what. Just put in cluster bomb.
Cluster bombs.
And that way I'll know it, because I get lots of junk mail, and it's a good way to keep in touch. I'm also interested in people that have had experiences from Agent Orange. I'm trying to follow up on people whose stories here, if you're locally, I would certainly like to hear about what's happened to you. If you had children that were born with birth defects, if you yourself are suffering, or you've lost a family member that has suffered because of exposure to Agent Orange or any other chemicals of war. Let us know about those things. It's important that we document those so that we can present that in the future and demand that these things are never used again. So again, I want to thank you for being here. Please tune in to Veterans for Peace Forum every fourth Saturday of the month. I want to thank my producers here, Kelly Labonte and Jim Lockhart, for making this possible. Remember, we need alternative media. We don't always hear these stories anywhere else. Thank you.